What's new in Teneo 7? So in this presentation, we're going to have a look at the highlights. We will cover a lot of things here, but of course there are maybe some details that we will not go into right now, but we'll have a look at the highlights. And what are those highlights? Teneo Studio Web, of course, is the big highlight of Teneo 7. So from now on, you have the option to work out of the web also when you develop inside Studio. So we're, of course, going to have a look at that and see what that looks like. We will have a look at the new way of creating flows inside the Teneo. So we have improved the UX of how you create flows, and we'll have a look at that. We will have a look at what those changes mean for the desktop version of Teneo Studio. The desktop version still exists, so we'll see how that one coexists with the new Studio Web and the guided flow creation. We will have a look at some of the other updates that have happened inside Studio, where a couple of them that I'm mentioning here is the solution creation process and also a new solution root folder. We'll see what they mean and what you can do with those, plus a few more details. We'll have a quick walkthrough, the technology and deployment updates also, so you know what's coming there in terms of tech stack updates, changes or updates into the public APIs, and also some changes into the dependencies. Yeah. Let's get started. The Teneo Studio Web. Okay, so that's the first one. We have a little overview here of what it is that you can expect to see when you log into the web, but apart from actually being on the web, well, what can you do there? We have made a list right now of features available, which is not the complete set of features. So we'll have a look at what those are. And we've also actually added a few new features to the web. And one of these new features that we will see here, for instance, is a solution dashboard. Okay, you will have the home page with all the overview of your solutions. And then when you open one of your solutions, there's a new solution dashboard that gives you an insight into the solution that you're opening, and we'll see what kind of information you can find there. There is the simplified solution creation process, which was created for the Teneo web, and then also has been implemented into the Teneo desktop, and that one is available, or basically you can create solutions on the web. You can create and edit language objects, entities, and flows. Okay, so those are the three main elements that you can work with when you work on the web browser. You can use the simple tryout or a very simplified version of tryout when you're on the web. And then of course, everything is fully collaborative and integrated with the Studio desktop, right? So you can actually work while one of you on the team can be working on the web, while somebody else is working on the desktop. You will all be working into the same backend. So whatever one does is reflected for the other. Locking of elements, etc., is also implemented. Okay, so these are the features that have been implemented right now on the web version of Teneo Studio. And as you will know, all of you who are familiar with Teneo Studio, this is only a limited set of the features, and more is to come, right? So we are now exposing this new access to Teneo Studio, and then we'll collect feedback, and we'll see, okay, what should we go from here, right? We do, of course, fully acknowledge that to be able to do the full thing, when you want to develop a full solution, you will still need to work with the desktop the way that it is currently, right? So the desktop is not going away, and you will still, for the kind of solution development that you are doing, you will still be working with the desktop right now, at least. I think what we'll see also once we've had a look into the Teneo Studio Web, what you will see is that these features that we have here, they are super good for somebody who doesn't need to know the deep, let's say, levels of what you can do or what you need to do when you build a solution. And They can be very good for like sharing and letting somebody just try it out a little bit and see how does it work, how can I easily create a flow, etc. And then especially combined with the next feature that we will be looking at, which is the new guided flow creation process. Okay, so those are the features that have been included in this first release of the Teneo Studio Web. Any questions or comments? No? Then we'll have a little look at a couple of slides before we go into looking at the actual product. So the homepage, where can you see what, how can you see what is actually inside your solution? So this is an image from my web version here, where I can see that I have two solutions, and then I get let's say a quick overview of what is in it. I get some quick statistics. I can see what languages it's in, and as you can see, maybe you can appreciate it here. Mine is actually returned in Spanish because I have some Spanish language setting here, so it uses browser language also for that. And then you get some basic information about the last update of those two solutions. Yeah. You have the option here to start creating a new solution if you want to. So that one is available here. And then filtering, as you've seen also in the desktop version, if you have many solutions and you want to filter them out based on name, you can do that also. Then the new, let's say, this is somewhat similar to what you know from the desktop, with some additional pieces of information, or displayed in a different way rather, because all of this could already be seen in the desktop version. But what we have added now for the web version here is this here, the solution dashboard. Okay, so this is this is two versions of the same dashboard here, where you get different pieces of information. And maybe right now here, when I'm sharing the slide, it's not too big and it's maybe a little difficult to read everything, but we'll have a look in the browser in a little while, and you can see that you, on one hand, you get statistics for the content, so you can see how many items do you have of different kinds, flows, entities, and language objects. You get some usage information here. When was how much have you been working on these different elements? What were the last elements that you edited or added into your solution? All of that information is displayed here. And then this other view here, this information panel, where you can actually go and read a little bit about all these different elements. What are they, right? So especially for somebody who's getting started, maybe you can go here and you can like read a little bit of it's not a tooltip because it's longer than a tooltip, but you can go here and get some understanding of what are these different elements that you can actually also access. Okay. So this is the solution dashboard. That's what it looks like. Again, we will be opening a solution in just in a little while, and then we can see it with a little bit more detail and click around a little bit. Then the next element here that I wanted to share is the content overview. So how do we, based on this dashboard that we have here, how can you actually access the content inside the web version? And here you can see that you can do it in three different, or actually in four different ways. You can go in and you can look at only the flows, and here then you will get a long list of all the flows that are available in your solution. So we're ordered by flow name and not by the folder. That's what you can see here. So then you get like a full list of everything. You can also go in and have a look at all the entities that you have in your solution, again, ordered by the name. Or you can have a look at all the language objects that you have, and then also again ordered by the name. So you have a view here that allows you to see the content per type, right? So these are different document types that you can have a look at. And then you of course also have the probably more well-known folder view, where you can see how things are organized in your folders as you know them, and then go in to the tree structure that you may have in your folders and browse the information. Now, what you can also see in this screenshot that I have included here is a little sneak peek into the new feature, which is the the solution root folder, right? So you can see here I can actually have an element that sits on the highest level here, but we'll get back to that in a little while when we talk about the solution root folder. Okay. So that's it. Let's go have a look at the Teneo Studio on the web to have get an idea about what that looks like. So I have my browser here, and well, that's the login page. So I'm just going to log in here with my credentials, and then we'll log into my solution, or sorry, my environment. And as we can see here, I have two solutions. I can see their name. I can see the description if they have one, what state they're in, some basic statistics about each solution. So when I hover over here, I can see how many folders I have in my solution, number of language objects, entities, flows, etc., and the total number of documents. The language of my solution, and as I said before, here it's being displayed in Spanish because I have some Spanish language settings on my browser. And then I can see what is the latest revision and how long ago was this solution edited and by whom. Okay, so that's the basic information. I have the option to go delete here if I don't want the solution anymore. And I have the option to create a new solution if I want to do that. So all of that is what is displayed here on the first level of the solution homepage, or the overview here. Then if I go into one, then we get to see this dashboard, as I was telling you about. So you can see here is my dashboard where I can see what I've been working on related to flows. When I had a high activity on July 18th, as you can see, that's where I did the most. And then I've been working also today, where I've been creating and modifying elements, as you can see here in terms of flows. The same goes for entities. Again, you get a summary here written in what was the last element that I was working on, or somebody was working on, because if it hadn't been me, of course, then that would also appear here. Same with the statistics. Same goes for language objects also. So they are also here. We can see this overview. And then eventually we have the pie chart here with the complete solution structure, where I can see all the content that relates to flows, folders, language objects, and entities. Okay. The other view that I also had included in my slide here, I can get to that if I click here on the information panel here, the eye, and then you can see I get a little description of what a flow is. So I don't think I need to tell many people in this call what a flow is, but if somebody is just getting started on Teneo, well, then they can go here and get some help in understanding, okay, what is actually a flow, and is that what I need to create, with some links also to Teneo AI for more understanding if they need some help getting started. The same information is available about entities and about language objects. So there are some explanations here about what these document types are, and with links to the relevant documentation online here. If I click on the last one here, well, then I can see get some information also about what is a solution and what is a bot in general, and then I can read a little bit about that. If I just go back here to the overview of all of them, then what else can I do here on this page here? I can actually, well, for instance, I could access these elements. So if I want to see all my flows here, I will click on the arrow, and then I will be taken to that overview of all the flows that I have inside my solution. As I said before, they're ordered alphabetically. Okay, so, and then I have the option then to filter them or order them based on different criteria. So I can use all the different columns here to order and see what is in there. If I want them sorted by the folder, well, then I use that, etc. If I'm looking to see if I have some flows here with pending work, then I can sort by the to-do label, and then I can see I actually have a new flow here with some fields that I still did not work on that I probably want to have a look at. I can go back. I can use this sub menu here to navigate. So if I want to go back to my overview, then I click here. It's a menu that appears, and then I could do the same, for instance, for the entities. Go in and see here, what are the entities that I have inside my solution. I can open them, of course. I can click on one of them and go in, and here we can see what an entity looks like in the web version. So very similar to what you are used to, but with, of course, a little bit of a new look and feel because we're on the web. I can again use the menu here at the top to click back to the top level. Same for language objects here. I can go in and see all my solution language objects. So everything that has been created locally in my solution, I can see that here also. Good. If I want to have the overview of the folders, I click here with the solution structure, and then as you can see here, I get in and I see all my folders. I see the content that I have created on top level, so on solution root level. And then if I want to click into my folders, well, then I can do that, and I get the subfolders here as usual, right? So you can go in and you can dive into the path of all your elements here. As you can see, the flow path here, or the folder path, sorry, grows as we go deeper and deeper into the levels here. So if I go back here on the top level, the other option that I had here is to use my tryout. So I can go here and I can load my tryout. If my model needs to train, I may get that message first, but otherwise I can start talking to my bot here, okay, and then it will respond to me. As you can see, it's a very simplified version of tryout, so it's simply for having the basic dialogue and to verify if what you have built is actually working. There's no flow path or any sophisticated debugging tools available here. It's for the dialogue testing purely. If I want to create new elements in my web version, I have different options. I can go to the pluses that you see up here, and I can click here and start my flow creation process, for instance. I get the option to add a name when I start. I get the option to add variables, and then I can create it. I'll just get back to this in a little while when we'll try to build a flow. So right now I'm not going to go ahead and build a new flow. But as you can see, this is a way of creating new elements, whatever it might be, entities, language objects, or flows. Okay, so they are created here. When I'm inside one of the documents, or if I'm inside the folder structure, I of course also have the option to do it here. So you can see if I click here, create a new document, when I am on the solution structure level, I can create any of the elements that are available. So a new folder, a language object, new entity, or a new flow. Either of those are possible. If I'm inside in any of the other views here with flows or with language objects of entities, what I can create is only the type that I'm actually looking at. Okay, so that's the way it's been organized. Good. If I want to go back to another solution, well, then I click here on my Teneo Studio icon or shortcut, and then I'm back into the solution overview here, where I can select another solution if I want to work on another one. Questions, comments?
Yeah, one question regarding the tryout. Is there any option to view the variables and the content and all that stuff which you usually use for debugging?
Not at current, no. In the current version, the only thing that has been included is the question answer part of the tryout.
Okay, thanks.
More questions?
How soon after you update a flow or a language object in the desktop version does it sync up to the web version?
It's basically immediate, so the same speed as if you were working, both of you, in the desktop version as you're used to. I don't have a second profile, so I can't log in right now and show you, but it appears within a couple of seconds.
Yeah, it's all in the cloud, so that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. More questions? No? Okay. Then I'm just going to go back for a moment here to the slides, because I then just wanted to bring a few tips to your attention when you're trying to or starting working with this, the web version. One thing you may have noticed or very quickly when I opened the entity, which is a new thing, is that you can actually search inside the entities now. So if you have like a very long entity with a lot of elements, now you have the option at the top to search out that particular entry that you want to work on. So that's, I think, is a nice feature here. Also, we will see now that we have some new elements here. Well, it's called match and aftermatch. Well, I'll take that back. They are not new actually, but they're old elements with a slightly new name. So when you are using with those, you will be suggested to use the language objects or entities that you have worked on last. So from the assumption that if you are adding something new here, then it's something that you want to use. Okay, so we'll also have be prompting you there to use the most recent objects. When you start working here in the web version, you will probably find it useful to know that you can use control and click with the mouse to move around in the flow editor. And you can use control and the usual scroll on your mouse to resize the flows. Okay, so you have that option to move around. Then another thing to highlight here is that it's since this is now web-based, you can actually also work in 2 tabs at the same time. So when you're on your browser, you can log in, or you can have the same environment open in more than 1 tab. Okay, you can open the same solution also in 2 different tabs, so that is an option. If you do that, you want to make or keep in mind that how tryout works, of course, and if you are inside the same solution in different tabs, tryout will be synced over 2 tabs. Okay, if it's more than that, then the performance is not guaranteed, so to say. But if you're inside, if you have 2 tabs open from the same solution, then tryout will work. The other thing that you can also do actually now with working with different tabs is that you can have 2 solutions from the same environment to different solution from the same environment open at the same time, which is something that you, of course, in the client, as you know, we're not able to do, right? So now if you're on the web, well, then you have the option to do that. If you need to copy something over from one solution to the other, for instance, that might be useful. Keeping in mind, though, that if you work in 2 solutions on the same environment, 2 different solutions on the same environment, then tryout will only work in one of them. Okay, so then you will have to decide which one you need to use tryout in, if you need to use tryout, but you only have one tryout engine available when you work inside your profile. Okay. Then some other good to knows that we will also see now a little bit when we go into the flow building part. Regarding the flow building, you can, as we've seen, you can create a flow, you can edit a flow, but there are some of the flow features that you will be familiar with that are still not visible inside the Studio Web. Okay, so if you need to work with those, you need to go into your Studio desktop currently to work with them. And I've listed here I think all of them, but at least the ones that are very important for you to know, that currently you cannot adjust those in the web version. You need to use your desktop to do that. So one of those is transition ordering. If you have multiple transitions, you cannot reorder them on the web. Same goes for trigger ordering. That's not something that you can touch on the web right now. You need to go again to the desktop. Everything is still fully available in the desktop, so it's not that you are not able to do it. You just need to use the other access. Okay. Output features such as skip conditions, resume prompt, output parameters, those are not displayed either in the web. So you again go to the desktop if you need to work with those. Metadata is not displayed either, and everything that is like, say, backstage, the flow backstage panel is not displayed either. So for instance, you cannot run a flow auto test. So everything that has to do with testing features, etc., same as solution, basically, you have to do that inside the Studio desktop right now. Yeah. So just to highlight that those are some of the limitations, you could say, at currently that you need to be aware of when you start building out flows in the web version. So again, as I said before, the web version, I think you will see that it's super good if you need to do a quick design of a flow. If you want to share it maybe with business users who doesn't need to know, let's say, all the underlying elements of a flow, but maybe want to try to design something on their own, and then afterwards some of the skilled developers take over and put in all the details. Well, that could be a very good way of combining the usage of Studio Web with the usage of Studio Desktop. Okay. So yeah, those are some of the things that you should be aware of. Also, of course, be aware of the browsers that you can actually use when you want to work in Studio Web. So as you can see here, you can work in the recent versions of Chrome, Edge, and Firefox, and also the latest version of Safari with the caveat that on Safari the Zoom does not work today. Yeah. General questions about the web version before I continue?
One question, just real quick. Can you do anything with like the global listeners or variables in the web, or is that all still just in Studio?
That's still in the desktop version. So everything that is global scripts, global variables, global listeners, all of that is in the desktop version only at current. More questions? No? Okay, good. Then let's continue to the next topic, which is the guided flow creation. So what is that and how does that work? First of all, it's about an improved UX, right? So the user experience when you're building flows. The focus has been on guidance and simplification to make it easier to build your flows. The principle is that information is exposed gradually when you may need it in the dialogue development process. Okay, so in other words, that means that you will get different options depending on where you are in the development process of your flow. That means also that we have introduced some new labels. Okay, that is especially for the guidance part here, I would say. First of all, inside the flows now, you will have a visual marker telling you when a flow is raised and when a flow is dropped. Okay, so you will see now these two icons here in the flow editor or in the flow graph. Raise, of course, happens only once, but drop may happen several times depending on the flow that you have been building. You will also see this kind of label here, the give response label, and I have included two versions here because they look slightly different, but depending on if you're on web or if you're on the desktop. So this is the desktop version here, and this is the web version. Give response label is a way of visually, in a clear way, telling you when you look at the flow, where will the engine stop, right? Where will the engine stop and wait for a new user input? It will give the response to the user, the responses that have been, let's say, accumulated in the previous steps, and then it will stop there and wait for a new input from the user. And then we have introduced also these plus symbols inside the flow graph to tell you where you can add these different elements, the different elements into your flow. It can be flow nodes as you know them, but you will also see that there's more than just flow nodes in the sense of output nodes and script nodes, integrations, etc. As you know before, that you will now be able to add with this plus symbol here. As an example, this is what a flow can look like. This is the web version here. So we can see here that we have the first part where it says user, which will be what we have, what we would call a trigger inside the class. Well, Teneo 6, we would talk about triggers here. But as you can see here, we're actually splitting it out, right? Because this is not all of the trigger. Part of the trigger element is here in the match part. So when we talk about user here, we're talking about the input or the interaction that we are waiting for from the user side in order to be able to go down or go into this flow here. Of course, assuming or when only in the situation where the match is met. Okay, so that is what we have here. We can see we have here a class match from a TDR flow. We have the pluses here, as we can see. So we will see inside the Studio in a little while what can you actually see when you click on these pluses, but you can see we have pluses on different places, in different places on the flow. So with these pluses we can do different things, as we will see. We also have a plus here up here at the top, which is for adding a new trigger. So if you want to add a new trigger, then you can also click the plus up here. And then we have the raise and the drop labels or icons, as we said before. In this one, we don't have any give response label because it's a simple FAQ flow. Give response labels, they will only appear if you have multiple outputs that you maybe you group together, or if you have multiple steps in the flow where there's additional interactions with the user, and there you will need to mark, or you can mark, where the give response should happen. Okay, so those are some of the news that we have regarding the flow editor in itself. Apart from that, we have introduced some new concepts. So we have introduced the concept of a transaction and transaction elements. We will see those when we will see these concepts when we click on the plus icons. Okay, so they will appear here. A transaction is, let's say, the full thing where we will give a response label. We'll add a user intent, so that part where we're defining what the user will say, including a match, and we'll also be adding a but output. So as you can see here, transaction in that sense is the full journey, right, back and forward. That is what we'll be adding here. A transaction element is a piece of a transaction. So it's if we only need a part of the full journey here, full back and forward, then we can add a transaction element. So that's let's say a subset or a part of the transaction. So those concepts, you will find those now in the flow editor. There are three other new concepts that you will also find. The first one is called continue with. Okay, so when we click this plus symbol, we may see some places where it says continue with. And continue with means that we'll be adding something into the path of the flow. That same path, we'll be adding a new element to that one. Split path, as the name indicates, means that we'll be actually dividing the path. So if we need to add more paths into our flow, we will use the split path. Initially, of course, it's into 2 paths, but it can also be into 3, 4, etc. So every time we need to branch out, we can use the split path function here. And then finally, we have a new function that is called fork to. So if you are at the end of your flow, let's say you're at the bottom of your flow design, instead of the split path option, you will get the fork to option. And in the fork to option, you can go in and you can design like the whole, like a broader selection of paths here. If you need to, for instance, add two outputs at the end to be able to react to two different situations, well, then you use fork 2, and then you can get everything implemented into one go, all that you need with the complete transactions, for instance. So if you want to fork to 2 transactions, well, then you will get everything displayed in one go with output nodes, user intents, response labels, etc. As I was saying, the flow editor will display different options when you click on either one of these here, depending on where you are in the flow. Okay, and again, the options can be a transaction, they can be a transaction element, but they can also be flow links, scripts, junctions, the matches, the, let's say, elements that are already familiar to you because you know Teneo 6 and you've been building flows already. Okay, so again, we'll have a look now just in 2 seconds to see what does this actually mean. Questions at this point? Oh, good. So before we have a look at the flow building process itself, there's just one last slide I want to share with you, which is this one here. So a couple of the features that you are already familiar with have gotten a new name. Okay, so so we all have to get used to now saying match, for instance, instead of match requirement. So we will see that now when we go into the flow editor that we will actually be adding a match and not a match requirement. Data actions have been renamed to after match to illustrate that this is something that you will do after you have matched on the input. So we're like tying these two together also on the name. A condition has been, or a condition match, for instance, a condition match requirement will now be a TLML syntax match. So that stands for Teneo Linguistic Modeling Language Syntax. And that, in essence, is everything that has to do with operators, language objects, entities. So these different building bricks that you're using to build linguistic conditions, they are part of what is called the Teneo Linguistic Modeling Language. So now a condition, when you select that, it's as in the option to understand the intent, well, you will actually be selecting a TLML syntax instead. And then examples have been renamed to user intent. So those are 4 name changes that that you will see when you start working on Teneo 7. Below, besides the name, nothing has changed. Everything works in the same way as it's done before. Yeah. Okay. Questions? Or should we go have a look? We'll go have a look. Okay, so let us have a look here. Creating a flow, or all of these elements that we have in here. We will go try and we'll go create a flow now and see what it looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to click here on the plus here, and then I will create my cube flow. And some of you may be familiar with this one. So if I say I want to buy a cube here, that will be my flow name. I can add my description, and I can already add variables here if I know I will be using them. And I know that I will be using a variable that is called sModel, and that it should initially be an empty string. I will also be using one that is called sColor, and it should initially also be an empty string. And then I can go here and I can create my flow. I get a summary of the variables that I'm adding. I can delete them again if I realize that I got them wrong. But I will go ahead here and I will create my flow. And then that takes me here to my flow editor. So you can see this is what it looks like in the web version when I create a completely new flow. I have some to-do labels here. I have some oopses. There's something that I need to add in order for my flow to actually start working. Let's go edit here and say add a couple of examples. I cannot spell. Okay, I'm just going to add 3 to show what it looks like. And now you can see that my to-do label jumped down to the next level here. So we're going to have a try here with the plus and see what we get with the first one immediately after the user intent, where I have now defined my example questions. When I click here, I get an option to add a match or an after match. And the to-do label is on the match because logically, after adding my trigger here, I want to define how should I understand what the users are saying. And as you can see here, the options that I'm given are the same as you know from Teneo 6. I can choose a class, an entity, a language object, a TLML syntax rule. That is, in other words, the condition, so that you can recognize it here from the percentage sign. A scripted context, and as a new thing, flow variables and glow variables, they have been like put one level up, so they're now available here as matches that you can select directly on the first level, and eventually also a script. Okay, so those are the different options that we have, which is completely the same as you had before, no changes here. If I choose to generate, well, you can see I get this one here. How can I purchase a cube? A new class was added into my my model. I can add additional match requirements if I want to, as I've done before. I could go back here and also add an after match. So if I would need to extract information already in the user input, I could do that already here if I had to. So those are the options that I have at the top level here. You can see that the delete icons, they appear when I hover over. If there's something that I want to delete completely, I would use the options or this menu here, where I could go in and delete this node if I didn't want this match in the end, etc. The plus up here is for adding a new trigger. So you can see I will get those options here for either adding a trigger based on an intent or a prompt trigger, as you also know already from Teneo 6. Okay. And then we'll continue down now here in the flow graph. I have my raise icon. So technically this is the point where my flow is raised and put on the stack because the triggers and what happens before this point is technically not part of the flow. It's what fires off the flow, but the flow in itself starts after this point here. So what can I do here? Again, I get some plus symbols both before and after. What I want to do now first is that I want to add an output here. And I want to say, what model do you want? Just to add in an output and make sure that we get that one in place. Okay. And now I can look here at the plus symbols that I have before and after. I'm going to just click on this one just to show you. As you can see here, we have continue with as we were seeing before. And we have split path. If I click on continue with, I get a lot of options that are familiar to you: an integration, a flow link, a script, and a junction. So those are all the elements that you are used to also from Teneo 6. If I add, for instance, a script here, you can see I will get a script node added into my flow path. So it will be in the same line here. I don't want that, so I'm just going to delete it again. Okay. If well, actually, I'll just come back to it, because what I want to do now here, instead of splitting the path at this point, which is something that we will do in a little while, then I'll just show you what options you have below. Okay. You can see here we also have the concept of transaction element. So here I have the transaction element, which in this case, what I could add here is simply an output. That would be the logical element to add at this point of the flow. If I do it, well, I can just show you actually. Then you can see what happens here is that a junction is added automatically, and then I am splitting the path into two. I get two output nodes next to each other. So now I have two branches inside my flow. Okay, I'm going to delete that one again because I don't need it. I don't need the junction either at this point, so I'll go ahead and delete that one. Below here, what I want to add here is actually another output. So I'm going to say here, I want to continue with a transaction. Okay, so that was the other element that we could continue with, a transaction. So if I select that one, what you can see that I get in all one go is on one hand the give response label, telling the system that this response should be returned to the user. And after that, we are then preparing ourselves to listen for a new user intent. Okay, so in this case, my user intent would of course be that I want to pick up on a model. And I know that my models, they are called home, plus, and pro. So those would be my examples here on the user intent. And now I get the to do here below, because if I have a user intent, then I would also need some kind of match here. So I could ask it to generate, and then it should hopefully pick up on an entity that I've already created. So as you can see, it did so. I have an entity to understand all my cube models. Okay. And then I have my output, which would be the last part of this this transaction. Okay, so now I will just zoom out here just to show you that you can do that also. So you can see now we are here. We have our flow here with our entry point with our user intent and our match. We have a but output that is returned to the user. We have a new user intent, and then we have a new but output here. And then if we do nothing else, then the flow will be dropped at the bottom here. Okay. So that is what we have so far. Now, here at the end of the flow, what I can also do, again, I can continue with if that is what I want to do, but I have this other option here of fork to. And if I do fork to, as you can see, I get two different options. I can either select multiple transactions, so again, the full package here, or I can select multiple transaction elements that I want to add. In this case, I actually want to add complete transactions. And when I select that, you can see I get the option here to select how many I want to add here. And let's just select 3 here to see what it is that we're getting. So I will say, okay, I'm expecting 3 different possibilities here below. And when I do that, all of these elements are then added in one go. Okay, so now I already have the structure in place to be able to understand 3 different user intents after my last but output. Yeah. As you can see, the plus symbols, they continue to be added here on all the new transitions that are generated when I click, and then I get the options that are relevant at those different points here. My to-do labels are also added on my user intent, and whenever I fulfill one of those, it will jump down to the next one with the match, so that I'm guided in the process and putting in all the information that I actually need to put in.
Are the changes you're making on the web GUI automatically saved to the database, just like in any other web application, or do you need to push that save button?
You need to push the save button as it is right now. So until I save it here, it's not saved in the backend. So when I do that, I get that the document is saved. More questions, comments? Okay. I can, of course, here use the same options that I would do also before. So if I need to go in here and add a match, you can see here I get a lot of options, right? I could go in here and do a split path if I need to do that in the middle of the flow. So I could go in and create extra branching here. Or if actually here, if I use split path, what I would get again is here below, then I would have 2 next to each other, etc. So there's plenty of options here, and all of them the ones that you can use where you are in that given point of the flow. Okay, it will know when you need to add an extra element, etc., and then add them for you. If I don't want to save my changes, so you can see that when I did modifications here, the save icon was appeared. If I don't want to save my changes, what I can do then is simply go back. Let's say if I go back here, then I will get a notification saying that I have unsaved changes if I'm sure I want to leave, and then I can click accept and then go back to my flow overview. And then we can see now here, if I filter on the to-do label, that in my I want to buy a cube flow, I have some pending actions here that I should take before I could release this flow into the world. It will already now be a part of my tryout. So if I then I should hopefully be able to. Maybe in my model. No, my tryout is failing here. Not good. So well, I was expecting to be able to show you that my flow is working here. Obviously that failed, but the tryout picks up on everything also in real time, or at least it should. So so you can go and try out your development on the fly and then see that everything is working the same way that you have been doing it also in Teneo 6.
Are you able to set stable and unstable versions on the web?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
You cannot do that. You cannot see the history either, for instance. So it is really a let's say a flow design tool right now. I would let's say for the sophisticated development that you're doing, you are still going to be going into the desktop at current, right? So it will be for future releases that additional features will be added, making this more and more functional. But right now, for the let's say the usage that you can make of the web, I think for you here in the call who are skilled developers, is more limited than you're used to, and that's for that same reason. Right now I will say that it's a tool that is super useful for you to talk to business users. If you have to do a demo and you want to give somebody access and they should try it out, build some flows without worrying about all the details that actually sits behind, right, and make that what makes the intelligence work. Well, that's you can achieve right now on the web version, but whenever you want to go in with the advanced features, then you still need to go back to the desktop and do it there.
Okay.
Yep. And then talking about desktop, unless if you have more questions right now about the guided flow process. Well, actually, let me just go back here before we switch. I just wanted to also bring to your attention that on the new documentation, there is an appendix that lists all these new options that you have on the in the new guided flow process, right? So when you're like getting familiar with all the options that you have when you add a plus or when you click on the plus, what will it actually do, etc. What are the new elements that you have inside the flows, etc. There is a good overview on Teneo AI here that will show that for you. Actually, I had the link here. Let me just find the link for you, and then I will share it in the chat so you can go there and have a look. So, because I find that quite helpful when you're getting familiar with all this new terminology. At the end of the day, it's terminology, right? And getting familiar with how you work with different things, because what you can do is feature-wise what you are used to doing. You're just going to be doing it in a little different way if you're working off the web. Okay. So I've shared 2 links here in the chat, and I think those can be interesting for you to have a look at. As you can see here, there is an appendix with an overview of all the flow plus options here on one hand, and also all the flow node elements that the way that they're presented, what they're called, etc. So if you are just getting familiar with the new names, well, then you have them here as a reference. Good. Then let's have a look at the Teneo Studio desktop and see what does all of this mean for the desktop version. First of all, as you can see here, this is an image from the desktop version. The desktop version has been aligned with Studio Web. So you will also find the plus icons here, the raise, the drop, the new option of adding a trigger here on the flow, and also the response label whenever that is relevant. Okay, so that in terms of your user experience is fully aligned. You have the same options in the desktop as you have on Studio Web when it comes to the guided flow process. There's also the solution creation. Well, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here. Solution creation on one hand, flow creation on the other. You do also still have the ribbon bar in the desktop here. So the ribbon bar at the top that you are familiar with, that one continues to exist. So you still have that as an option for adding elements inside your flow. You can do that still. However, the right-click option has been removed. So if you were used to adding elements by right-clicking on a node and then adding something after that, then that option, I'm afraid, has been removed to align the two interfaces. And then we leave the ribbon bar in the desktop, so you still have that one and can work with that. Okay, and then you get the pluses instead of the right-click option. We have also, as a new thing inside the desktop client, which is not so much about aligning with Studio Web, but we have moved some features. So now if you want to add content from an external solution file into an existing solution, then you do it inside the solution now instead of doing it outside. Okay, so that's a change. And yeah, those are the main, let's say, changes in terms of what the client looks like. We'll just have a look at it quickly just to explore it and see it real time. So I'm going to log into this one here. Okay, it's the same environment as I was in on the web before. That means that I've now been logged out of my web version because I can only be logged in one place. Okay, so if I'm logged in on my client, I cannot be logged in on my web. So it's either or. But you can see here, this is the solution that we were looking at just before that I updated 9 minutes ago. And if I open it here, you can see that this is the flow that we were working on before with my to-do label and some other elements that I have here on my solution root level. Okay, and then the rest of the content, the layout, the ribbon bar, everything else here is the same. But let's just open the flow because that's where we have most changes. Okay, so you can see that it basically looks the same as on the web, of course, with the look and feel of the Studio client, but we have the option here on the plus to add a new trigger. We have the pluses here below the intent where we can go in and add, in this case, additional match requirements, not the class, because we already added that. Okay. When I click on the trigger now, because I already have a match, then I have the whole menu here with the user intent and the positive examples, and I have the full list of options as you know them. Okay, so nothing has changed here. In the flow diagram, we can see we have the give response label at the same place, of course, as in the web, slightly different layout, and then it just goes down here in the flow. If I just zoom out, you can see the branching here below with the 3 options that we added when we used the fork 2 option that you get at the end of the flow when you use click on the plus symbols. Okay, So that is the change also here in the desktop client, so that we have the same experience and the same options in terms of the pluses, and then we can also use the ribbon bar at the top as we've been doing so far. Okay. The other option that I just mentioned here is that if you go to the solution backstage and then to import export, now the add content option here is new. So if you want to import something directly into your existing solution, the one that you have open, then you do it here now. That's a change in behavior compared to Teneo 6. Good. Questions about the flow editor in desktop? Then we're going to go back here again and see what other updates do we have included. Solution creation. So that is also an update here. Basically, we have simplified the process of creating a new solution. The window that you get when you create a new solution has been let's say shaved down to the essentials. It's a step-by-step process now, so you will get you will like go through the different steps when you do it. You will assign a name, you will assign a language, and then you will decide if you want to use the template solution, in other words, the dialog resources, or if you want to start with an empty solution, and then that's it. Then you go into the solution, the new solution that you're creating. A new update here is also that lexical resources will from now on be auto assigned when you create a new solution, so you don't have to go to the solution backstage panel and select them. So if you create a solution in German, well then the German lexical resources will automatically be assigned to your solution. Okay. If you need to change any of the other properties of your solution, such as the confidence threshold or any of the other options that you had, you would see in the solution creation panel before, then you go to the solution backstage and modify them there. Okay, so we can just go here and we can have a look. If I close this one here and say I want to create a new solution, then you can see I'm prompted to select the language. So I'm just going to select Danish now that I can. I will have the Danish dialog resources pre-selected here as they are linked with the language. And then I could choose, of course, to create an empty one. But if I want to create it with Danish, and then I click OK, this is my name of it, and then it will start creating. So it of course takes a little while to create as usual. While all of this is being added, we can just go back and then we can have a look afterwards when the creation is done. A new thing also is that with this new simplified process, it's no longer possible to change the language of the solution. So once you have selected the language of the solution, then you cannot modify that anymore. If you made a mistake, then you need to go back and create a new solution, delete the wrong one, and then create the new one in the correct language. Okay. Branching, if you need to create local solutions in a master local setup, then that process has also been reworked following the same steps as we've just seen, where you go step by step and not displaying the big window as we used to. Then finally, in general, the reuse of solution files. So if you're working with external solution files and you're moving them from one environment to the other, or if you are importing a backup file, etc., then as you maybe noticed, when you create a new solution, you're not able to select that import from a new file anymore. You will have to go then afterwards, you create an empty solution if that's what you need, or with the TDR, and then afterwards you will merge it into, or you go directly to the backstage of Studio and then you import the file as an independent solution. Okay. And now my import just finalized, and then you can see a new feature is also actually that I'm prompted to open the solution. That's why I didn't want to close down this window here. So I'm prompted to open the solution directly and go into it instead of before, where I just confirmed and then I could see it in the overview. So now that my Danish solution has been created, I can, just to show you now, if I go to the solution backstage here, you can see that my lexical resources, they have already been assigned, so I don't need to worry about doing that anymore. Good. Just to wrap up this concept about the merge or importing content from another solution, actually, so you will now go here and then use this import solution function if you want to create your solution based on an already existing solution file. Or if you want to import it into an existing solution, then you do it from inside the solution. Yeah. Good. The solution root folder is another update. So as we've already seen a couple of times now, I can now create content and store it on the solution root. That means that it's technically not necessary anymore to create a folder in order for you to start adding content. It was up until now, then you had to start by creating a folder and then you could add flows and entities and language objects, but that limitation has been removed. So you can just go ahead and create your content immediately. So that makes it for a little of quicker start if you are just trying out different developments. The solution root folder will always have the same name as your solution. Okay, it cannot be renamed and you cannot remove it. It's simply, let's say, surfacing that root level of the solution. And when you add new folders to your solution, they will, of course, always be added within that solution root folder. That's basically the lowest level of your solution. That yeah, as you can see, means that when you're inside Studio, for instance, in the desktop client, as we were before, that means that now I have this level up here that I didn't have before. Before we would just have the folders, but now we have the solution root level also, where I can store elements, as you can see. So I have 3 elements here. And then well, I can, of course, always move them back in or move them out to my folders when I want to organize things and make sure that my solution is nice and tidy. Yeah. Just as an observation, then, you know, the auto test, and the auto test can run on different levels. If you run it on the solution root folder level, that in essence means that you're running a solution scope test, right? So that's the same thing. If you run a folder test on the solution root folder, then you're actually running a solution scope test. Yeah. So just as an observation to make sure that's clear. Good. Other updates that we want to highlight here, and one of I think interesting update is that the behavior of the revisitability feature. So you know that on the outputs you could set if an output should be if you should be able to revisit it or not. The default behavior has changed in Teneo 6. The default behavior was that revisitability was not enabled. In Teneo 7, the default behavior is that revisitability is enabled. Okay, so on all outputs in complex flows, you will per default have the revisit enabled, and with a setting of 2 times. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind when you start developing on Teneo 7. Migration information. When you migrate an existing solution to Teneo 7, we're not going to change any of the settings on your current content. Okay, so they will continue with the settings that you have already defined. But any new content, any new outputs that you add into the same solution, they will, of course, follow the new behavior. So that means that if you add a new output to an existing flow, well, that new output will be marked for revisit per default. So if you don't want that to be the case, then you have to unmark it. Yeah, to-do label has been also improved, or let's say extended. So now it also flags the incomplete matches and after matches, as we've already seen. So when I had to go in and complete my match, it will highlight that one and also after match. On flows, you can now see the ID directly inside the flow. So if you're using the flow ID for certain statistics or anything, then you can see it directly now inside the flow. And then, as we already saw, another update is that flow and solution variables, they are now surfaced as separate types of matches. If you recall, in Teneo 6, they were also available as a match requirement, but they were sitting below the context match requirement. So now we have just made them more visible by adding them on a higher level. Yeah. And that brings us to technology and deployment as the last topic. So unless somebody has some, let's say, questions about the more implementation studio work, then we'll continue with the technology side of things here. Any questions before we continue? Okay, good. Then let's go to the technology side of things. Some highlights regarding the tech stack. Okay, we have introduced the first iteration of audit logging. Okay, so that means that we can now log admin actions that are performed in the Teneo Manager. So where we're administrating anybody who has access to the different solutions, environments, etc. We have added additional information in the Teneo Studio logs. So when we're all working in Teneo Studio, we will be generating different log files with pieces of information. Some of them are, or many of them are just info messages, but some of them are warnings, etc. But if you've ever worked with those, you will know that there's a lot of interesting information to find there. And now we've added additional info messages into the pack, so we can see more about what is actually going on under the hood when we're using Teneo, each one of us. We have added notification handling by the use of WebSockets, and that has to do also with Teneo Web and with Teneo. Well, and that has also been then fed back into the Teneo desktop client. Okay, the Studio Web entry supports SAML, as you can see here. We have updated the version of Xstream, and we have fixed a view type information disclosure that we had detected some vulnerabilities in. So those were the highlights regarding the tech stack. If you want, there are more like complete or information. I really recommend that you go to the platform documentation also. If this part of the platform is one that is interesting for you and that you want to read more about, then do go to the platform documentation for the full details, or of course reach out to your customer success manager or in any of the usual channels for more information if there's something here that you would like to understand better. Okay. Apart from the tech stack updates, we've also made some changes to the public APIs. So again, related to the WebSockets, there is now a Studio WebSockets API. We have added additional endpoints to the Teneo Studio REST API in general. So everything that you can do through API calls inside Studio. You may recall that the Studio API was introduced with Teneo 6, and now we've added some additional methods here that you can do. And then we have also enhanced the API for the Teneo Manager. Okay, so the Teneo Manager can now also access the Studio API. So everything is related at the end of the day. Then a bug fix that I wanted to highlight here. We have improved and changed some things related to the Studio API and the Teneo Manager API to respond to some issues that had been reported to us. And those changes are backwards incompatible. Okay, so if you are using some of these methods, which are also listed in the documentation, then you should check them and make sure that your usage or the API calls that you're using are not on the list, because then when you go to Teneo 7, then you would need to update to the new version. Okay, just so you're aware of that. I'm not sure how many of you will be using any of those API calls yet, but in case you are, then make sure to check them and to update them if they're affected. Good. Dependency changes. There's been an update in the version of Tomcat, in the Log4net, and Jackrabbit. Okay, so this is mostly for your information. It should not be something that you should need to worry about, but just so you are aware that these dependencies have been updated. And then, of course, we have updated our resources, our language resources, our conversational models, also known as dialogue resources, and our NLU ontology and semantic networks, also known as lexical resources. So all of those have been released in a new version with Teneo 7. Yeah. Final update here before I'm done talking is that Teneo Discovery has been removed from the platform. So if any of you had been using that one, for your information, it's no longer part of the package. So there's going to be no new releases of Teneo Discovery. Yeah. Resources, again, let me highlight the release notes. They are packed with all the relevant information. If you have not tried yet the Teneo 7 guide, which is available on Teneo AI also, I recommend that you do that. It's a step-by-step guide through all these new versions, or sorry, new features in the platform, which takes you through the changes both on web and on desktop. Okay, and it's very helpful to just walk through that. You have the full platform documentation, of course, also online. You have the full reference documentation, and then you have the community and the knowledge articles with additional information about Teneo 7. Well, maybe not so much about Teneo 7 on the community and the knowledge articles yet, but of course it will come. But it's there if you have any questions that you want to ask, and of course the knowledge articles, well, about conversational AI and Teneo in general.